All right, well, welcome everyone to session, well, build data governed products with all the mesh, without all the mesh,
Yeah.
all the mesh. Vishal, I'm going to just give it over to you.
Awesome.
Get started.
Okay. Disappeared, so awesome. Thank you. My name is Vishal Singh. I am the head of products for data products and data governance at Starburst. I'm pretty excited to talking about data products. And one thing which I like to talk about that, like everyone as people go on a data mesh journey, data products is essential to be on the data mesh journey, but you can build data products without being on data mesh journey. Data products is important irrespective of whether you're on the mesh journey or not. And that's why I like to talk, even do the demo in the end, into how easy it is to actually talk about the collaboration, the governance piece, even without following exactly every principles about the mesh. And over the time, you can actually achieve all the principles of data mesh as you evolve and your organization evolves. Here you go. So first, what is Starburst? We are the data and analytics company. This went twice. And then there are four principles which Starburst is built on: simplicity, access, optionality, and scalability. So Starburst is built on the open source engine called Trino. And Trino has been deployed at the Netflix level, Airbnb, and whatnot. So it already works at the petabytes of the scale and has been used even in the Athena, EMR, and other sources are actually built on Trino. The Starburst, the founders and the co-founders of Trino, which was built at the Facebook level, started Starburst, and that's how Starburst was evolved. Not only the actually taking the, I am not clicking anything. Okay.
Fastest presentation in the whole place. I think AI got it.
Man behind the
Okay.
curtain.
I think ChatGPT got insight.
So as I was talking about Trino, and that's the power of Starburst comes from. So one of the things which we are really proud as we build our platform, we like to talk about scalability. We actually, the scalability, we are building a more and more performant capability in the Starburst. But from the get-go, the Trino, or Presto, as initially known as, was built at Facebook. And it's already scales and being used in many enterprises to scale with the petabytes and data coming in. Simplicity, you don't have to move your data. That does not mean you should not move the data. The data movement is needed, but not every data needs to move to gain insight from the data. Move the data as per need basis, and that's the overall philosophy, that if you want to actually write a query against a customer data set in a reason one and some other data set, and the query is being running once in a day, is there a need to move all the data to that region, or can you just move the table or a column or that particular data set as materialized views or something in order to gain the insight from the data set? Access. Since we being the engine over all the data set, not only can actually access all the data sets from the single point of access, you can also govern the data sets from the single point of access. And the last, optionality. The Trino, or Presto, when it was developed in the first place, it was developed in order to give the customers to use the tools of their choice. So you can think of any tools like Tableau, Power BI, any tools that all works with our Trino and the Starburst. So we also are saying that even though we do provide a great user experience, but if you pick choose a tool, which could be Jupyter Notebook, Python, Tableau, all the tools works with Starburst and Trino. This is a high-level view into what we do and what the platform contains. You can see the query engine, which is powered by Trino, already contains many ways you can not only get outside the Trino, but we have built on the top of that, which is the warp speed is the one ways what we do is like we deploy a cluster with solid state drive in order to do the smart indexing and caching. We have cost-based optimizer, cluster auto scaling, dynamic filtering, Python data frame APIs, and many more. So that just comes from Trino and the tree, but we have also built different tools like data products, data profiling, data quality, all in the platform, leveraging the power and the performance of the Trino. But today, I'm going to talk about data products. Starburst contains many aspects. As I talk about governance, the clusters, cluster auto scaling, but I'm going to focus the conversation, what are data products? There has been evolution of the data products and definition of data products after the data mesh came out. Data products is not a new term, has existed in the industry for many decades, has been used in the industry for many decades. What data mesh did, data mesh actually made the data products term more popular because basically it said you cannot achieve the scalability and the collaboration in the platform without going on data products journey. And data products become one of the many pillars of data mesh. If you took on a higher level, there are three aspects of data products: usability, viability, and feasibility. If you double click into it, it becomes, what are data products? It could be a data application, data asset, which has a high quality data set, which can be discovered from within the organization and have a self-service component to it. And I can govern it, irrespective of whether my data is in a warehouse, is in lake, is in on-prem, is in cloud. I should be able to govern the data movement and how data is being accessed in my organization. Usability. One of the things when it comes to data set, how the data is being used, who is using the data, and how many times the data is being used. So data products are meant to be used by both business and technical users. Your consumers could be a data team where they are using the data products being consumed for different data team, or your consumers could be completely data consumers who are using it for the business or dashboards. It's intended to be consumed many times. One of the challenges when I talk to customers, which I've seen, is that, especially with the data lake, all my data is in lake. I do not know where the business approved data sets are, but I know where the raw data sets are, so I'm going to create the data product and reuse it. What it does is, like, many copies of the data start appearing in the organization from the raw sources instead of intending to use the curated data sets again and again. Over the time, when you have many copies of exactly same data set, it tends to bad quality, more maintenance, and the governance problem is that it will not be scalable. So how can we ensure the organization, when they are creating a data product or data set, that can be used again and again, which that can be discovered in a very different fashion than all the data sets in the organization? Lower TCO. When I can actually look at the data, find the data in a small period of time, and I know who's the owner, that itself saves me time to know where the data is. If the data is not going to get copied again and again, less storage cost. And the maintenance of data will be a lot less because I'm not maintaining 100 data sets, I'm maintaining 10 to 15 data sets. And this data products are a foundational element. We, as a Starburst and Trino and Presto, we talk about federation use case on different sources. But when I talk about data products, it's a federation of use cases. There's one data was actually used by, let's say, sales team. Another data product comes from marketing team. Now there's a use case federation I can take from the domain marketing and domain sales and create a completely new data products to understand how the data has evolved over time. I believe the Starburst data products is the data products platform for data organization that needs to rapidly connect the data consumers with high quality, reliable data sets. Data products is the end element when you create the data product which can be consumed. But data product by itself does not create a value if the platform around it is not there to support it. When I talk about platform, the platform where you can govern, you can search, and data by itself does not provide the value on the SLA side if you do not know what cluster to use. Is it going to be used in staging, production, who is using it, how many times getting used, and a lot more components come around the data because data is one component of data product. Data product evolve around compute, governance, access control, and many others, which I'll actually show in the demo in the end too. So where did we start? When we started talking to customers, these are the two personas we looked: data producers and data consumers. Data producers could be many personas. They could be business users, they could be non-business users, but the intent of data producers is who is producing the data to be consumed within the organization. Data consumers could also be technical and non-technical users who are using the data to create a completely new insight. The problem happens, data producers coming, we have curated data. How do I increase the visibility of my curated data so it can be used in the organization? How do I reduce the ad hoc data sets being created in the organization so that I don't have to maintain many different copies of the data sets? Data consumers have a whole different problem. They're like, I know there is a curated data set in the organization. I have no idea who to talk to. I have no idea how to get access to. How do I utilize the quality data for my analysis? So even they may have a knowledge that there is a data somewhere in the organization, but the path to getting access to data or path to just understanding the data sometimes takes weeks, days, and months. Which means if you think about the product lifecycle, it becomes like, how can we take a small data set and build a business use case around that and grow and scale on the top of that? And that's what the data producers are thinking. But in the end, the data producers can also be data consumers, which means like, how can I actually understand the data which I'm using and create a new set of data product on that, make sure the quality of new set of data product are also stable and maintained while somebody else is maintaining the quality of the upstream data products. Which goes to how do we inspire confidence in data consumption? And then creates a whole new quality problem. Sometimes I know there's a data set. I have found the data set. I know that my business has told me to use this data set, but why do I trust this data set? Just knowing where the data set is does not necessarily mean that this data can be used in production level. So I have found the data set, but how do I know when the quality checks are running? Who ran the quality checks? How do I know all the upstream data set quality checks are also in the intact? And that brings to a completely new set of problems which data producers and data consumers talk. I need to deliver reliable data to my consumers. How do I build and maintain the trust? How can I reestablish the trust if something goes down? We work in a software company. Nothing is perfect. No SLA is ever 100%, which means that it's got 99%, 95%. When it goes down, how do I go back to my consumers? I have fixed the issues. You're good to actually go and use it. How can I proactively maintain the trust around the data? Can the data consumers have to keep coming to me to ask for, is the data set usable for, let's say, in the dashboard or even maintaining, creating a new ML design? Data consumer, they said, I know where the curated data sets are, and I also know the business context. But how do I verify the fitness of use? My producers told me you trust the data, but what are the facts they are giving me so I can trust the data? And till what date should I keep trusting the data? When the data is going to expire? So sometimes just knowing that where the data is does not necessarily solve the problem itself. And like, does this data look good to use? I have used this data previously. Can I use it again? I have questions and concerns about the quality. How can I get this addressed? So these are the questions data producers, data consumers are asking all the time. And most of the organization, they set up the meeting. There's a lot of things happening. There's a self-service component walks away when these questions come in the data consumer's mindset. How is Starburst special? Starburst connects to all the data sets irrespective of where your data lives. whether AWS, Azure, GCP, on-prem, no matter where your data is, it connects to all the sources. So one of the key principles around visibility into all the data gets solved by using Starburst. We believe that one needs to have single access point to all the data set. Does not mean you need to have a single source for the data sets. It's impossible, and people have tried in the past to move all the data set in single region or single location, which means data is actually distributed across region, across teams, across geography. Now that my data is different places, how can I actually govern the data sets? The governance, it becomes another nightmare, because now if your data is in region 1 in AWS, how can I govern that data set with my EMEA data sets too? Why do I have to govern the data set in 2 different places? How can I see the evolution of data set between 2 different regions while making sure the right folks have right access to data sets? And the query the data, which had been used for business, frequent business use. Without naming the customer, one of my customers actually mentioned the problem that it's like they build their own data catalog, and then when they actually log in, and the customers are like, they're going to search for the table customer. They search for the table customer, and you get thousands of results for customer table. As the end user, how do I pick which customer table to use? It's not that you don't have access to data. Sometimes you have access to too much data. So how do I actually filter down to my business use case to actually go use the data set for the intended insights I'm trying to drive for the organization? I'm going to go through the roadmap quickly, then I'm going to go to the demo. These are the things which I'm actually focusing overall, and some of the things I'm going to show in the demo too. We are not just thinking around access to data, the cluster and whatnot, and this is just roadmap on data product side. We have a bigger roadmap on the Starburst side. But we are thinking, how can you create the data set, data product from distributed sources? How can I search in the single plane? Not only how can I actually manage the quality of the data set in the same plane as the data is evolving, let's say into Snowflake, Lake, or whatnot. If the data has changed, how can I maintain the quality in the same place? While actually understanding and trust where the data has come from and how data has evolved. And over the time, how can I actually share the data set and govern the data set? So this is a complete roadmap, and I'm happy to chat after this session too into what piece of the roadmap is important. But this is a complete roadmap into how we are thinking of data products in this year. Over the time, the more things need to will come. So for demo, I'm going to walk. Let me go back. I'm going to walk through the. Can you connect? So. I am seeing only one screen. It's not sharing my screen, which I'm seeing. Sharing completely wrong thing. Desktop too. Okay. Sorry. I think it might
Share the screen.
Yeah.
This is Mac.
Yeah. The mirror the screen instead of extend. It might be here.
Okay, can you minimize this?
Here. Sorry. Oh.
You need to get the system preferences.
Maybe in here. Screen mirror.
Yeah, that should do it.
Okay.
Back around that window.
Okay. I can actually. I can't even click it. I don't know what to.
Go now.
This one.
Look there.
Okay.
And mirror.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Sorry, my calendar came up. So what I'm going to do for the demo, I'm going to use, we have two different products. One is Starburst Galaxy and Starburst Enterprise. Starburst Galaxy is a fully managed our SaaS product. And we have Starburst Enterprise, which you can take the VPC and you can deploy, you can take the source code and you can deploy in your own VPC. I'm going to use the Galaxy for the demo, but we have both options where you want to deploy the product right in your VPC or on-prem. That's also possible. For the demo, I'm going to be using 3 different personas because it's hard to actually show the power of the governance over without actually showing the multiple personas. One persona is account admin, who's the admin and can see all the compute all the sources across my organization. Other persona is actually coming from manufacturing department, and they have access to some limited subset of data sets. And the last persona, which I'm going to be using, is vendors, which is like came in the organization to work for a limited period of time for the manufacturing department so they can collaborate on subset of stuff which manufacturing department is doing. If I go take a look into the number of catalogs, you can see the Starburst is a query engine. It's not a data catalog. So let me start by saying that we are not a data catalog company. We are a query engine. Data catalog, attribute-based access control, and all those are extension of what we have built. Even our pricing does not incorporate the data catalog and ABAC. That's actually completely free on the top of what we have built. The pricing is based on the cluster consumption and number of queries you're writing. It's nothing to do with all the functionality which I'm going to show during the demo. If you can look that I have actually connected to all the different catalogs which could be from AWS to BigQuery to Elasticsearch to MongoDB to Snowflake, I can easily connect a catalog. I can even click here. It gives me option what I'm trying to connect. I can connect different object storage or additional data sources and few more and more coming in the future too. So here, one of the first things which I like to talk about is like as the account admin, I have seen all the data sets. If I go to manufacturing, I just take a look at the limited set of data sets which I have access to. I don't get to see all the data which I have access to. If I look at the vendor, I have just access to only a set of data sets which have been granted to work in my organization. The great piece is that we have used the concept of data mesh and decentralization too. In the case not only the manufacturing, as you can see, manufacturing can see subset of data set as compared to account admin, but we have also given manufacturing an option to connect their own data source. So manufacturing does not have to go to account admin to connect a data set or create a cluster. They can easily create and bring their own data set without they have permission to connect to data sets within the organization. Going back, here if I actually search for a data set called customer, it will go through all the catalogs which you have connected and look for the information where the customer is connected to. And it will give you information to the column level, to the schema level, to the table level, and I can understand what actually is happening on the customer level into different places. And I can even click through it. Let me click into the BigQuery, and I can get more information on it. So there's 2 different kind of documentation we have. One is the technical documentation. What I believe the technical documentation is a very basic documentation for your data team to understand where the data is coming from, small description, which can be used into our data catalog capabilities we have built. You can also tag. We also have a source comment. Source comment in the sense like if you're using BigQuery and we added a comment there, this will also appear here, so you do not have to maintain the comments and description here. You can maintain the comment in the raw sources, and that will be used to search and empower your consumers coming into the organization. The ownership is automatically getting populated based on the owner or the user who connects the data set. And I can look at the different queries, different columns. I can look at the metrics. The metrics is a great component about this because we are the query engine. So as you are writing queries and as the queries are getting executed, the top users, top columns are actually getting populated with the queries coming in. We, not being a data catalog, but being a query engine, we do not have a lag by the time you actually create the data set and by the time you can search the data set. The moment you connect the catalog, the moment you create a table, that is searchable across the organization within seconds of connecting the data set. So there is no crawling, there is no ingestion happening because we are the query engine. We can look at the data in the source as your data is evolving. You can look at definition, you can preview the data, you can query history, audit log, and not only that, you can actually give privileges to folks. Privileges privileges is also in hierarchical, where you can define hierarchy of your organization and give privileges to bottom of the hierarchy, and then based on that, everyone will get access. The great example is here. You can see the manufacturing has select from the table access because it was granted to the public user. If I take the permission away from the public, almost all the folks in the hierarchy will get the permission removed. So you can create the hierarchy of your roles and permission and domains, and based on where you define the roles, folks at the top will get access. Let me take a look into, and again, one more thing I'm going to talk about the ownership. So we also have a concept of sub-admin, which means that if you have an ownership concept is not only on data, but also on the cluster, which I will talk to, is that once you're an owner, you can invite people to use that data set and a cluster. As an owner, you do not have to go back to your top level account admin to able to get permission to say, can I actually give someone the access? You can always change the ownership. Here I can change the ownership to someone else. From account admin, I can change the owner to finance or engineering. And if I give the access to finance and engineering, then they will also have the privileges tab, and they can bring new users to get access to that data set. If we look into the manufacturing, here I can look at the manufacturing too. I can look at all the data set. And based on that, you are looking at a small set of data set. If I go look into, let's say, in Redshift and Burstbank, here you see the ownership information is, the privileges information is missing because I have not given manufacturing to actually give privileges on top, and there's not. But at the same time, the owner is actually not manufacturing ownership is the account admin. If I go back to Redshift in this, and I'm going to use and if I change the ownership of this data set to manufacturing, and if I take a look here, you see the privileges tab reappear on that piece. Now what happened as an owner, now manufacturing have access to bring users and give access to the data set. So sometimes it's just a matter of who owns the data, who owns the infrastructure, and based on the ownership, they can actually become the sub-admin of not complete platform, but exactly that cluster and the data set itself. Going back, I talked about there's two pieces of documentation. One is the technical documentation which maintain, but we also have complete business documentation which will evolve over time too, which, let me actually here, where I can look into details of the full documentation, and that comes to the data products. As you can see, as an account admin, they have access to many, many data products, and I can go take a look into pharma manufacturing, and I get the full text documentation on that data set. Writing this documentation is not easy, and sometimes expecting this kind of documentation being written on every data set is not realistic. So we have to make a decision into which is my technical data set where I do not have to write this documentation, and how can I separate my special data product where I'm actually forcing users to write this documentation. Taking here, I look at the summary, I can get more information where I can actually link to a Tableau dashboard where the data is being used. Data is coming from Capital One, so I can actually link there. Which default cluster, so sometimes not only I have access data, but which cluster and compute should I be using this data to consume from. So you can even share the data in your organization without sharing the compute, or you can share the data with the compute in the organization. So that's how you can, as an end user, when I come in, I also know that this is the default cluster which had been assigned to me to consume this data product. Not only that, I can even get connection details and connect this data set into different tools of my choice. So for example, which is where the optionality come in, I'm actually using Hex, I'm using dbt, I'm using Power BI. I can even use those tools of the choice, and all the information is available. How can even somebody use this data product in the tools of their choice? If I look at the view schema here, it takes me back to this screen where I can actually get more detailed information of this data product. I can see there are 3 different tables in it and a view in the part of this data product. If I go into the manufacturing, manufacturing will have almost a similar view to this data set. And I'm going to remove this tag for now. Manufacturing has the similar view to this data set. If I go to the vendor screen, and I look for the exactly same data products, vendor have very limited, not all the data product access, only data product access they have been given to. And if I go to the pharmacy manufacturing, I got the same documentation. And if I look at the view schema, I see only one table. What not only you can actually share the data, but you can actually change the view of the data which the user are looking in that data product. Here, if I go into customer, what I've done is like I'm using our attribute-based access control. Anytime I tag something with customer.vendor, that will automatically be shared with our vendor's persona or vendor domain coming in. I can add a tag here called on this stores. And as I added the tag, and if I go back and refresh this, the vendor will also have access to store sales data. So by using not only our RBAC, which is also comes, we can actually govern on the resource basis, but using our attributes, you can govern at scale on how the data set is being shared across the organization. If I look into customer from the manufacturing side, there are some couple of PII information which I do not want to be exposed to the vendors too. In that case, the birthday is a PII information. And if I go into look into the vendor side and the customers, you see the birthday is not shared with the vendor itself. So you can not only control what tables they are looking at, but you can also control what columns they have access to. You can mask the column. You can also hide the column from the vendor or from the users looking at the data set or data product without making any new copies. So this is where you can scale because you have the single copy of the data, but the view of the data will be different based on the users who are actually looking at the data set or based on the persona coming in the platform. I believe right now we do not have automatic data classification, which is actually planned for our next quarter. But I believe that the birth year should also be PII. And as I add PII date of birth for here, and if I refresh this, the birth year disappeared. So you can actually tag and create the policy in advance into where the data sets should have access to what. And as the data is being created, you can tag the data. And those data sets with those policies will be respected based on the attributes on the data set itself. If I go look into the views here, which let me go back to. I can also see that order information is also contains customer.vendors, which had been shared with the vendors. And if I look into the order information, make sure the cluster is running. So cluster is suspended. It's going to take some time to come up and running. But if I actually go take and preview the data, so one thing which we do, we don't store the customer data. So at any time, if we want to get data preview, the cluster has to be running. We have a capability in the platform where clusters, we can put the auto suspend on the cluster. So what happens when you're not running any queries, the cluster shuts down automatically. But when actually I write the query, you can see the cluster starting in the background in order to come up, and you only get charged for when the cluster is running, not cluster auto suspended. So this is why auto suspend behavior is the part of the platform with the cluster scheduling, where it can schedule the cluster to run from 8 to 5 p.m. never suspend, because there's a lag for the cluster to come up. And after 5 p.m. you can say the cluster suspends, goes in auto suspend mode, and if somebody's working overnight or whatnot, then they will respect and have a lag because they are working overnight the cluster to come up. The intent of showing this auto information is that we also have a row level filter policy. So not only you can actually use attributes to govern what column they have access to, but you can use attributes to govern what rows of the data they have access to. And here I can say I can look at all the data. I'm looking at the customer segment, gold, platinum, and whatnot. If I go back to the manufacturing and look at the auto information here and preview the data, we'll see the data which actually comes out. They only have access to customer segment gold, while manufacturing has access to customer gold, platinum, and whatnot. So you can even use attributes to not actually govern on the column side, but on the row side. And this doesn't stop here, which I was talking about, the foundational elements of the data products. Here I can see all the clusters running in the AWS, GCP, and everywhere. I can even filter, like show me just data products. And this will actually give me the information into all the data products that one has access to. One can actually quickly look into data products on a query engine, or actually look at all the data sets. Not just that, I can actually go to my query editor and use this query, which is the data coming from S3, Redshift, Snowflake, and Postgres, and get the result out of it. So now, right now, I'm running the query where the data is coming from S3 Lake, Redshift, Snowflake, Postgres. None of this data is moving, but how do I actually get my users access to this data set? Let's call this data set as the auto information. I can quickly create a data product, add to an existing data product. For the demo, I'm going to use the existing data product. Let's call this, I think I'll go into the, actually I'll go to the new. I don't know where exactly it is. So here, what I can do, I publish into one of the data products. Like in the Lakehouse, I want to know which catalog it needs to go. I call this the demo data product as a schema, save and continue. And then here, it will give me the query option which I was using. Let me actually give some details, which can be edited later. Test, and some description. And I add some contact information, which is, I don't have the contact information. Let's call it Ali as the contact information, save and continue. And I give the query where the data will be published. We give user 3 options. 1, you can take a snapshot as a table. The data in a point will be created as a table, will never be refreshed. View, in that case, data is coming already from the source all the time. There's advantages and disadvantages to it. When you're really using View, if your data is coming from Snowflake, then you end up paying for the Starburst and the Snowflake compute every time the query runs. But we also have materialized views. Materialized views basically does that the data gets cached as object storage, and they refreshed the interval defined by you. So it can get refreshed every 6 hours, every 2 hours, every 3 hours. So based on the use cases, you can actually create your data product, a data set as a table, which could be a single snapshot, maybe used for ML and AI applications when you want to take a snapshot to train something, or you can use View when you want the dashboard to be actually up to date based on the data as updated in the underlying system, or you can actually use materialized views when you believe the underlying system is not scalable and there's a cost associated with that. Then you can actually refresh the data with one query at once in a day, and while your hundreds and 200s of users are accessing the data from the object storage without moving your data all the time. So there are many ways to create data products, and as the data products is being created, you can actually understand how it was created and who was created, where it's created from. There are a few things which I cannot show, which is lineage and the other piece, but we have one of the great piece about Presto and Trino. It logs every user action and audits. So you can see if I go look at the reports, if I change my history to last 7 days. It will give me where the data was used, what sources were used to data, which users were using the data, all this information already there, and those information keeps getting populated as the queries are coming. You can also restrict who can see what query history. You can restrict this domain and this role get to see only query history for their own team and nobody else. You can also say that this user gets to see only query history for himself or herself. Or you can actually, an account admin, you can expose the account admin can see the query history for a whole organization. All those resources and permissioning are available based on, as I said, you don't need to be on a mesh principle. You can be completely centralized and govern from at the same time. But as you are scaling, you can give folks permission, which is here on the permission system. You can create a role. Let's call this MIT. And if I go create the privileges, I can actually give a user the privilege to create a cluster, never create a catalog. So one can actually just create a compute, one can actually create a data set, and all those privileges are available based on the role they're driving in the organization. I know there was lots, so I'm going to take a pause. And we still have 15 minutes. Any questions or? Yes.
It's not. There we go. It's working now. Questions for the audience? Oh, okay. Sorry. I didn't know you were looking forward to ask a question.
No, thanks. Bob Audette from Guidehouse. I have a question regarding a lot of what you just showed. Seems like there's definitely a lot of flexibility.
Yes.
How much sort of effort is really needed to sort of strategically think through your classification approach up front? Because there's so much flexibility that
Yeah.
if you just start if you just sort of start without a strategy, likely this may lose its efficacy. So I'm just kind of curious if you can talk a little bit about that.
So, so one thing which I say is the start with, I mean, it's like the same way I said a product managers, like what does your MVP look like and where you want to go from there? The point becomes, and I can give an example for one of our customers. I think they are public customers. They are actually a health pharma company in the UK. And what they have done, they actually create data products. What they've done, they started with the R&D department. They did not actually roll it out into the complete organization. So they have in the R&D department, they came up with what kind of drug discovery they want to do, and they actually went with the S3 and one bucket data source to understand how they want to create the processes beforehand on the small data set. The classification piece, as it's like, we do not have automatic data classification at the moment, but we do integrate with other tools like Immuta and others. So they have actually used your tools integration with the tools to even automatically classify the data which we provide. So they started with that. Over the time, they actually rolled out to different team unit to actually maintain the cluster configuration without giving the access to the data, because they know we will govern what the curated data is coming from, but we don't know how much access the data you need to your organization. So I'm going to give you option to create your own cluster and actually scale the cluster based on your production and staging and whatnot. So that's the strategy they have actually taken before they go into full-fledged production. But it totally depends on, again, your organization, what you're trying to solve. We have customers who are just running one catalog, one clusters, and actually we also have customers who are running many clusters in the catalog, like Bank of America is one of our customers. They run on a whole new level. So it completely depends on which strategy and where you are in the journey of your maturity of data set.
Other questions?
So how can Starburst help me decide which data products to continue to fund and which ones to cut?
Great question. This is something, let me actually show our enterprise, and if I can show you there, because something which is not in this. But one of the things which we are doing is actually showing the few things we are doing is that which data product is being used, which data product is not being used, and how often they have been accessed. That information is available. So one thing which we actually, for example, this is a view. Don't tell me I don't have access to it anymore. Let me try this. Oh, looks like I don't have access to this one. But I'll go to into this section. One thing which we do is if I go look into a data set here, and if I look at the metrics, you can look into how many queries are coming in the metrics and evolving. One of the things we are building over the time in the data products, which I was trying to show on a different screen, is a list of which data products and how many queries are actually coming every day and which data products was created and never being queried. Those information will be highlighted on the top of like where the data, not just that, but the lineage chart, where like not just the data product, but if I actually have a primary data product, but if there's a second data product which has been built on the top of that, somebody may not be accessing the primary data product, but they're accessing the secondary and tertiary. We also expose that information so you can quickly look at the insight into which data products is popular in the organization and which has never been used and but been maintained and being actually evolved over some time. Those informations are available.
Does that include who?
I'm sorry, Dave?
So does that include who's accessing?
Yes. So it's just like here we do have a top users, top sources. We also have a query history. You can actually look at the email and role, and all those information are available, not just the email which role and department is coming from too. One thing which I didn't show is like we have the searching capability here too, which is also I can search for customer table and actually understand like how the data has evolved from here too. So if I actually search for the customer table and view all the results, you can also understand from relevance and searchability from this screen too, and actually figure out like which manufacturing tags, who is the owner or whatnot, and get more information on from this page itself, like how the data set has evolved over some time. And you can see the last index as created by and last query, those information will also be available on this page too.
I do have one more question, completely
Yes.
different. So one of the difficult aspects we have in building data products is getting that time series atomic layer curated first from
Yep.
our wide variety of disparate data sources. So how does Starburst help me with that problem?
Let me understand the question first. So when you said time spent, like where the data is coming, so they're coming from different IoT devices and getting dumped. Like I'm speculating into.
Well, they could just be completely different data sources that all need to be brought together to give me my 360 view of the customer. Just
Yep.
as one example.
So the few ways, and again, there's no right or wrong answer, but please tell me if I'm wrong here. We have built the capabilities like if the data is coming from, let's say, a warehouse, where the data will be always be, you're actually moving the data, and the data will be actually reflected that the data is in warehouse. But if the data is coming from IoT devices, this is why we call ourselves data lake platform than the federation platform. What means that if the data is getting dumped to S3, ADLS, even a MinIO or whatnot, we actually have a capability in the platform where you can go to, let's say, GCS and run discovery. What I mean by that, you can schedule a discovery in your bucket as the data is evolving, coming from a different pharmacy, CVS, JSON, and whatnot. And you don't really have to actually maintain and add the data as the data has been coming from the different places in the lake itself. And once the data gets registered into the Metastore, then it becomes querying the data. And we will, over the time, which is also on a roadmap, is actually giving you, look, which data has actually come from the raw side and how the data has evolved. So we can actually write the queries against this data set and create a completely new data product on the top of that. Not sure if I'm answering the question or not.
Not exactly.
Okay.
No, I'm good.
Other questions?
Are there any online, Mark?
I'll check.
In terms of the data products themselves, like who are the different actors that are involved in creating those data products, and kind of more specifically related to that is how does governance sort of woven into actually governing those data products so that they can be trusted and managed to ensure that they're being useful for downstream purposes.
So our governance actually, especially on the tags and the resource side, is actually flows from the source to the curation. What I mean by that is that you can, when you create the raw data sets, let's say you can actually govern them based on these are the roles who have access to it. Now, when you create, let's say, from a one data product and two data product, and you actually create something new, the tags and the governance rules also actually the applies to the source data set. You can see from here, like this here, like you can see this is actually has a row to it, which means that this thing was applied to catalogs. And when it's applied to catalogs, it's automatically get applied to schema, and the schema is automatically get to the tables. And then if you take two views and create a third view, those tags on the columns gets also applied to the curation too. So you don't have to always keep actually adding a tags into the new source, because what you're doing, once you actually govern your source over the time, we are taking that capability. So you do not, I've already tagged this as PII, and I've actually created a new table out of this. Why I have to tag it PII again? Why cannot I learn from the raw source that there's a PII? So we not only there's something on automatic data classification, but we are actually doing the evolution and the exposure of those tags and attributes to the raw set. Second is one of the amazing thing which I love about Starburst is the ownership. If I change my role and I create a table, the ownership automatically get granted to the role, not the user. So if I create a view or a role, then I become the owner automatically, which gives two things. The auditability, we have a complete audit logs into everything I just showed. So it will know that who actually created this role. I created a role, created data product and whatnot. So you get the full audit log of user action, what has happened. Second, as an owner, I have created something so I can actually go and I govern that piece of data set. I do not have to go back to my governance team. I will not be able to create that table if I'm not going to have permission. But if I have permission to create it, if I have permission to delete it, if I have permission to destroy it, then I should have permission to actually extend to the users I have access to extend the permission. So those actually flows automatically. We don't have to do anything around this. So ownership and the tag propagation are automatically done as you're creating the tables and new data sets.
Vishal, we have a question from the virtual audience.
Yep.
How do you manage dev test production environments across distributed data producers? Do data products get developed in dev and go through a migration, or are they built on the production data?
So the question back to when we think about the production and the staging data, and this is where my understanding could be wrong, but it's mainly about the compute. Data and compute is separate. You can always create a copy of the data and test the data with the staging compute. And this is where if I go here in my data product, I'm going to use the view details here. You can see this data product is connected to one compute, but I can always connect this data product to multiple computes. Yeah. So here you can I can always actually go and actually connect. I'm trying to find if I actually something here. Lakehouse. This is a great example. So you can see that this Lakehouse is connected to 3 different compute. One is actually used for fault tolerant, which is for ETL workload. One is actually for warp speed, which is mainly for BI stuff, and one is just for staging or something. So you can actually use exactly same data, and you can define different compute in the staging, and I can scale and unload the scale based on the use cases. But at the same time, if you do not want to impact the readability of the data, you can also assign the user to not able to change the data because they will have read-only access data. So completely based on the user and the compute, you can govern staging to production, but at the same time, you can always make a copy of the data too.
Okay, we have another question from the virtual audience. What is the team structure expected to maintain and evangelize this?
So this is where I go into like a team structure is basically I think about the data engineer and somebody acting as the product owner. When I talk about product owner and product manager, it doesn't have to be personnel with the title, but somebody playing that role. The reason why I talk about data products, that role is really important because as a product manager myself, I get multiple requests from the customer on what feature to build. I cannot build all the features. I need to prioritize based on what is needed for the platform, what the customers are asking for, what is the severity of the feature. Same thing applies to data set too. Somebody needs to be actually taking the backlog of like what's getting built and what is being maintained over time. And so the main key for like who is actually maintaining the backlog of all the data requests and also making sure that, for example, I look at the Mixpanel and different telemetry account, like how might this feature is. If the feature or data product is not being used, then how can I actually retire over safely at the same time? And that role becomes really critical because that is the person who actually is scaling the team based on the needs of the organization coming in the organization.
Any other questions here before we wrap up? We're down to a minute. All right. Well, why don't we give Vishal a round of applause for a great presentation and demo.